celebrated our 30th anniversary. So I thought I'd start off by showing you a picture from around that time at what was then the Royal Blind Society. And there's a few people here who probably remember the Royal Blind Society. Some of you even worked there, I think. This is a picture of one of the first talking computers that was introduced into Australia. And I know no one was around at that stage, but some of you might recognise through historical value that this was an Apple II. And accessibility in those days was actually quite a simple thing. You put a speech code into a computer and the screen was all text. And then Bill Gates came along with this idea of a graphical user interface, and it's been going downhill ever since. We've thought about accessibility very much, I think, in terms of disability. And so we've thought about groups of people, we've thought about individuals who need some accommodation to be able to fit into whatever else is happening. And that's been a process, I think, of where the gains have been made through confrontation, through protest, through civil action, more than through society leading the way. If we look at one particular group of people who have been fighting for accessibility for a long time, and that's wheelchair users. I've got some clippings here from the paper. One from 1950 was the extraordinary title of Wheelchair Invasion of City Land. From 1950. The language that's used is unbelievable. But this is a struggle for accessibility to the physical environment that's been going on since 1950. So we've got a long way to go, but hopefully we're going to, and I think we are starting to see this whole issue of accessibility move away from looking at it in terms of disability, and we're looking at it in terms of diversity. That we need to have systems that are accessible to everybody, not to a particular individual, not to a particular group, but to the wide, diverse community that we have today. Our schools, our workforce, our community is becoming increasingly diverse, and we need to respond to that and develop ways of making sure that everybody's included. I'm not a big Facebook person. I know that's shocking, but occasionally I come across some gems, and I think this series of images that I have up here is a gem. The first image shows three young boys trying to look at a baseball match over a wooden fence. There's a tall boy, a medium-sized boy, and a short boy. And in that first image, they've all been given boxes to stand on. And that means that the tall boy and the medium-sized boy can see over the fence and see the game, but the short boy still can't see over. And that's where I think a lot of our thinking about accessibility has been, that we're looking at equality. So we're providing each of those people with an equal opportunity and equal support. But clearly that's not working for everybody. In the next image, we've got the three boys again, but the box that the tall boy was standing on has been given to the short boy. The short boy's now got two boxes, and all three can see over the fence. And that's really what we're now calling equity. Everybody's got equal access to the view over the fence. But in the third screen, and this is where I think we need to be heading, the fence has been removed, and there's now a wire fence. So each of the boys can see through the fence without having to have support. And so it's this removal of barriers, removal of institutional barriers that we need to be looking at. I forgot to start my timer, so I'll start a bit late. When we're talking about access to information, diversity can include a whole range of things. And that's anything from culture, big cultural differences, big differences in education level, education advantages, differences between age groups. There are differences just in preferred styles. Some people can actually access information better by listening, some people better by seeing, some people better by touching. There are cognitive abilities, there's difference in languages, different physical of these things are impacting on all of the institutions that we're working in. Increasingly so because we're moving away from face-to-face interaction and we're moving to a more digital-based environment. In the past, if you were able to go up to an accountant and talk to someone and sort things out, it was a lot easier. Now you're increasingly going to be directed to a web page, and if you don't have real access to that web page, you are being excluded. So this is what we're talking about, digital inclusion, making sure that everybody can access those systems. Some businesses are seeing diversity as an advantage. It's a quote from Bruce Roche, CSR manager at Adecco, which is a Fortune 500 company with 31,000 employees and 5,000 branches in 60 countries. And they've embraced diversity. They see diversity as an advantage. And by being able to display a diverse workforce, we're being employers of choice, and that's what we want to do. There are other direct benefits that are being seen in a diverse workforce, including obviously a corporate image. If you're seen to be embracing the wider community, it's very good for your corporate image. Increased adaptability. If you've got people with different needs and different abilities, your workplace tends to become more adaptable. In recruitment, if you're recruiting from a much larger pool of people, there's an advantage to the business. So diversity is not what currently is often seen as, which is a burden, an additional cost, and something we have to, apply with and get around. So we have to change that argument around to looking at what are the benefits of diversity. What's changing, what's driving change? Certainly in Australia, the Digital Transformation Office is at the heart of that change. If you haven't got the latest update, on the May the 6th, there was an updated version of the Digital Services Standard, and that lists 13 things that the Digital Transformation Office wants every federal government department to comply with before they publish anything or put up a new website. And that is not law at the moment, but within the federal sphere, it's becoming mandatory. They won't allow things to be published unless they're meeting those service standards. Those service standards are likely to filter down to the state level, down to the local level, and into industry over time. The second thing is the legislative environment. We have some quite good laws in Australia around discrimination. We have one major flaw, and that is that people have to contest the cases and carry the risk themselves. So it's very hard for individuals to put everything on the line to take a corporation or an organisation to law, because if they lose, they can lose their home, and lose their livelihood, lose everything. We are seeing changes in other countries. In the EU, on the 3rd of May this year, there was web accessibility has been legislated as a requirement. And while we don't have that here yet, it's fair to assume that over time we're going to see legislation become more demanding and more specific about what needs to be done regarding accessibility. And thirdly, the big thing that's changing is technology. And we're seeing this huge explosion of technology around, that's more accessible, that's opening up opportunities for people to participate in a whole range of ways. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about. And we have technology solutions for individuals, and we have technology solutions for organisations. Individuals, we're seeing this huge growth in mainstream technology, so smartphones, tablets, etc., that have got accessibility built in, having a big impact. I'm going to show you a very smart app a little later that just uses your own phone. The specialist technology, there's a lot of people have been thinking that because we've got Apple committed to accessibility and so forth, we're going to see a decline in our specialist technology, whereas just the opposite is happening. This year at CSUN was one of the most fascinating and packed events I've been to. I've been to 23 years in a row. there is a lot of new stuff coming out. There's a lot of brains being applied to looking at some of the issues of accessibility. There's big changes in hardware. There's wearable technology. I'm going to talk about a couple of new wearable devices that are coming out. And we're also just at the edge of seeing implantable devices. So we've had the implantable cochlear ear for a long time. So we're looking now at 4 or 5 different prototypes of bionic eyes and joints, and there's a whole range of things that we're looking at. What was it, Blade Runner? Isn't that far away. For organisations, where the big issues that have been websites, is your website, if that's the main source of information about your organisation, how accessible is your website? How accessible is the content that you put out on the website? How accessible are the systems and processes within your organisation? You know, the Australian Public Service has had an entrance exam that's been written on paper for many, many years. And it's only just changed recently. So sometimes there are some really intrinsic barriers. There's another example that up until recently, if you made a complaint to the New South Wales government, they would only accept complaints in writing. So some of those barriers are there, and we're going to talk about some of those solutions around that. Companies are looking more towards universal design. We're looking at making the assistive technology components become part of their IT framework. So rather than AT being this sort of bit that we stick on when we're forced to, looking at systems where the AT is an integral part of the system to start with, and looking at tools for clients to make the access to your information more accessible. In terms of solutions for individuals, I've got something on charge here. I'll just read. Nothing worse when you do a demo when there's no charge. But you know, for a person who's blind or low vision, there's lots and lots of different tools: JAWS and Xenotech and Magic and NVDA and OpenBook and so forth. In the area of hardware, we're seeing big changes. So for someone with low vision who requires magnification, traditionally there's been a desktop CCTV type thing, and then perhaps a pocket-sized one. This is a tablet that's got a very smart pair of legs on the base, which open up that way. And when I turn it on, it's going to take a second to turn on. It's going to be a magnifier, so very equivalent to a CCTV, and also a reading machine. And I probably should turn that on before we start.
Magnifier started.
So I've got a magnifier now here that I can use regular gestures on to increase, decrease the size. I can change colour combinations. So it's a regular CCTV type function. But if I wanted to actually have something read to me, I can turn on a reading mode and press the screen. Click, it takes the picture.
Company contact information. Company organisation name. Quantum. Reading. Learning.
So it's now reading that information out to me, and it's displaying it in a format that's more suitable to me.
Postal address. Books.
And so in that one device, which is easy to carry around, it's a regular tablet-sized device. I've got a magnifier and a reading machine built into one device. So we're seeing big changes in the technology, especially around low vision. The wearable technology, this is what I would call one of Malcolm Turnbull's favourite words is disruptive technology. And we're just at the beginning of this. So we're going to be seeing a lot of devices come out. I have a picture of a person with what was a TV, a wearable TV back in the early 60s. It looks a little different now. So this is a pair of glasses from New Eyes, and they look like a pair of regular or rather chunky sunglasses, but they are incredibly smart. In the arm of the glasses, they've got a little Android computer, and in between above the bridge of the nose, there's a camera. So wearing that device, I can use it as a regular magnifier. I can look at a page of text, make things bigger, make things smaller, change the colour contrast and so forth. So it's acting as a regular CCTV type magnifier. But because I've got a little computer there, I can do a whole lot of other things. It's displaying onto a virtual screen in front of my eyes, and I can stream video, I can stream TV out of it, I can control my phone through it, and it's voice activated. I talk to it. And if I want to make things bigger, I say glasses make bigger. If I want to make them smaller, it says glasses make smaller. And it will also, it doesn't have just yet, but in a matter of a few weeks, it will also have that scan and read function. So you can take a picture of a page and have it read out to you. So we're at the very beginning of seeing this kind of power built into a pair of spectacles. This is a spin-off from a large US military organisation who developed the technology for the soldiers to be able to look at live streaming from a drone overhead while they're walking through the environment. And because it's got that very large backing of the military industrial complex, we are going to see change happening very quickly. There's another one called Allcam, and we do have these devices. If anyone's interested in trying them out, we can organise for you to have a look at. Allcam is one that clips onto a pair of spectacle frames, and it's got a little earbone ear conduction piece, so that it acts as a earbuds. What do you call it? Earbuds, yes. And Allcam has, again, a lot of intelligence built into it, and it's using artificial intelligence to recognise your finger. And if I was to hold a document up and point my finger at it, it follows your finger, and when your finger stops, it recognises there's a page there, and literally within about 2 to 3 seconds it will read that page out to me. If I was walking down the street and I could see a street sign but I couldn't see what it was, I could point at the street sign and read it out to me. If I'm in a shop and there's stuff on the walls or stuff on the shelves I can't understand, I can point at it and it will read it out to me. And it's really quite extraordinary. And I think they're both examples of the way that we're going to see a whole lot of our thinking around adaptive equipment changing, that these devices are getting smaller and smaller and more personal, and you can have them with you at all times. In terms of literacy support, there are also big things happening. We're going to have a hear from Richard in a bit just on the size of some of the issues around literacy support. But certainly we're seeing in education environments more students getting some sort of assistive tool for reading and writing and literacy support. There's lots of new media, new formats, new tools, and there's lots of this idea of use anywhere. So there's no point of having something if it's only working at the desk. You need to have something that's going to work at your desk and at home and on the bus and everywhere. So the idea of having devices that work all over the place. There are some universal tools that are being recognised in terms of literacy support, and these are also used in low vision blindness. The biggest one is text-to-speech, having things read to you. And it's extraordinary what a difference text-to-speech can make to a whole group of people who you might not even think of. And we'll talk a bit more about that later. Speech recognition, turning your spoken word into text. Word prediction, writing support, dictionaries, picture dictionaries, study support tools, Simplify is becoming a really big thing. A lot of people can't access very dense information. Go to your utility company and look up terms and conditions. You know, I challenge you to understand what's going on. And so there are tools now where you can actually just say, simplify this content down into a more readable, more digestible format. And there's one product in particular, it's called Read and Write, which is made by David's company, which gathers all of these kind of tools into one toolbar. And it is being used very widely in, for example, in the ACT now. Every student in the ACT has access to Read and Write, about 30,000 students. And students use it in different ways, but we are going to start to see people coming out of education with higher expectations around the kinds of supports that they may even have in school. I'd like to show you a little video on Read and Write, and it's in the words of the user. And it would help if you could hear that. Exactly. No, we won't. Well, look, we're going to have to miss that, I'm afraid. It was a fascinating short video from a guy in the UK who's got CP and several other issues, but has been using Read and Write to enable him to do his job. And in his own words, he's been assessed as having a reading age of 7 years of age. And then he goes on to tell us about how he's used Read and Write to write a report to the local government agency that he works for that has saved them £5 million by reorganising the way that they were applying their disability policy. So unfortunately, we'll have to skip the rest of that. Read and Write is a program that is available in basically any platform. So it's on Mac, it's on Windows, it's on Android, on your iPad. There are Chrome extensions, so you can have it built into your browser. I.e., you can have it in any environment that you're working in. And David is going to show you some of the other tools that have very similar functionality but used in different ways. There's quite a lot of research going on around some of these assistive tools, and research is showing us that things like text-to-speech will increase reading speed for everybody, will increase accuracy for everybody. I've got a little diagram on the wall. It's actually a chart. It's like an eye chart on my office wall, and it says reading gets, it is easier to read when text is in large, but the font's getting smaller as you go down the page. And I ask everybody that comes in who's sighted to look at that chart and tell me what's wrong with it. And everyone goes, oh, I don't know, there's something wrong with it. If you speak it out, you'll hear it says read, because the word read is at the end of one line, and the word read is at the beginning of another line. And your brain is just tricked somehow into thinking there's only one read, and you skip over it as you're reading it. But when you hear it, it's quite obvious that it's spoken twice. And so some of these tools are applicable tools for everybody. And that's why I think this is such an exciting product, because it takes away from being a specialist need to being something that can be incorporated across an organisation so that everybody has access to it. In terms of organisations, website has been the big issue, Joan's going to talk to us about accessible design, how to make your website accessible and comply with standards, and as well as comply with standards actually work for people that need to use it. There's an increasing number of add-ons for websites, and David's going to be talking about Browser Lab and how that can add a whole range of functionality to your website. There's videos, and Joan's going to talk about how we make videos accessible, and then there's all the other stuff, all the content, the text, the information. And there's a few products that I'll talk about. Common Look Office is one. If anyone came to this session last year, we had a whole section on Common Look, but I'll just mention it briefly. And that's an add-in for Word, and so as you've created your regular document in Word, you can click on the Common Look menu, and it will do a full accessibility check on your document before it becomes a PDF. And it will tell you what's wrong with it, it will tell you why it's wrong and how to fix it. And one of the things I think about Common Look Office and why I think it's important is that it puts the responsibility for accessibility back down to the author. And at the moment, just about every organisation that I know has just the opposite. The person creating content says, oh, I don't particularly worry about this. The web people look after this, the equity unit will look after this, someone else will look after this to make it accessible. This actually puts the responsibility back to the author, and I think that's the only way we're going to see cultural change around making accessible documents. They have a very similar thing for Adobe, for InDesign and so forth, and they have a free product called Validator. And everyone loves free, so you can Google Validator, Common Look Validator, and it will download a version of this product that will look at your PDF documents and tell you whether they are accessible or not. And then there's another one which I want to show you, which is called VoiceEye, and this is from Korea. And in Korea, this is used very extensively. In fact, it's used right across government. And what VoiceEye does, it's an add-in for Word or InDesign, and it's just giving you a menu option in Word or InDesign. And it produces a QR code. Now, when you came in, Olga and Becky were scanning your QR code. That QR code, the standard QR code has 7,800 pieces of information installed. 7,800 is not a lot. The QR code that's produced by VoiceEye has 255,000 pieces of information. So that little code can contain all of the information that's on 2 full pages of A4 content. When it's on the page, and for example, here's a bank statement where it's been included, and for the user, wrong device. For the user, they get a free app, downloadable app, and I simply scan that. I just hold it over, knowing roughly where the code is. And it's amazing, the live demonstration effect. Because I do this all the time, and it just goes like that. But when I'm doing it in front of the group, but here's one I prepared earlier, and it's now captured the content from that page, and I can have that displayed on my device, my phone, my tablet. I can have it displayed in large print. I can have it displayed in colour. I can have it read out to me.
January 2012, George Patrick STOBBART 123
And because it's now on my smart device, I can also share that through to my braille device, whatever way I want to. And so the organisations that are still sending out paper can, with that one code, provide their documents in an accessible format for everybody.
Sorry, it's a plugin for Word and InDesign.
And InDesign. Yep.
We work with the Australian Disability Enterprises, Ian, and you're doing a fantastic job showing us this technology. But accessing the funding, are these things accessible via workplace modification funding?
Horizon is brand new. I don't think it's anyone's right to get it through workplace modification. Certainly, just about everything else we do at this point is accessible through workplace modification, depending on the assessment finding that it's required. So, if everyone knows what workplace modification is, it's the best funded program in Australia. But I can't see any reason why this wouldn't be an option for somebody. So that's voice phone. That's about it for me. I'm just going to finish with a few points, and that's to say that accessible organisations are really starting to design their IT and information systems to be accessible by law. So they're including that consideration when they're designing systems rather than trying to retrofit somebody in. And we've got a long history of trying to fit people into systems rather than trying to make systems fit everybody. Just as we have physical ramps into buildings, we need information ramps for both employees and clients. Accessible organisations utilise technology to remove barriers, and by implementing things as part of your standard image, as part of across corporation, the cost is greatly reduced. Part of the problem with the cost of assistive technology is because it's been focused around an individual, and we're making these one-off things for people in very small numbers, and the costs are very, very high. If we apply a lot of the assistive technology as more of a universal design, the cost of the AT per person comes down dramatically. And so accessible organisations embrace diversity. And that's it for me. I think if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to have them now. We've also got a break, we've also got lunch where we invite you to come up and ask.